The sun was setting, and the last bit of golden light spread across the quiet street. A man closed the shutters of his small garage after a long day. His hands were tired, covered in grease, and his back ached from bending over engines since morning. All he wanted was to go home, have a simple meal, and rest. But as he walked toward his old truck, something caught his attention. On the side of the road not far away, a car sat tilted, the hood up, and a woman stood beside it with a worried face. Inside the car, a little boy sat in the back seat, holding a toy close to his chest. The man paused. He could tell from her expression that she had been standing there for a while, unsure of what to do. He hesitated at first. He had closed his garage, and technically, his workday was over. His body told him to just drive home. But his heart didn't let him turn away. He walked over slowly, wiping his hands on an old rag from his pocket. The woman looked up at him with hopeful but nervous eyes. She explained that her car had stopped working suddenly, and she didn't have anyone nearby to call. The boy in the back looked restless, asking when they would go home. She admitted in a soft voice that she didn't have enough money for an emergency repair. She could only pay a little, maybe tomorrow, but not right now. The man listened quietly, studying her tired face. It was clear she wasn't making excuses, she was genuinely struggling. He had seen that look before, the mix of pride and helplessness, the fear of asking for help, but having no other choice. Without a word, he leaned under the hood to take a look. His hands moved quickly, trained by years of experience. He asked her to start the car, listened carefully, and then went back to work. The tools he needed were still in his truck, so he pulled them out and began fixing the problem. Minutes turned into an hour as the daylight faded. The woman offered again to pay whatever she could later, but he shook his head firmly. "Don't worry about it," he said in a calm voice. "Let me just get you back on the road." She was surprised. Most mechanics she had met wouldn't even look at a car without payment up front. But this man didn't seem to care about money in that moment. He only cared that she and her child could get home safely. The boy in the back seat watched him curiously, sometimes leaning forward and whispering to his mother. The woman kept thanking him softly, almost in disbelief that someone would help without expecting something in return. Finally, after tightening a last bolt and checking the oil, the man asked her to turn the key again. The car came alive with a steady hum, the sound bringing instant relief to her face. The boy clapped his hands and smiled. She looked at the man with eyes full of gratitude, almost as if she wanted to cry but held it back. She reached into her bag again, pulling out a few bills, insisting he take it. He shook his head. "Keep it," he said gently. "You'll need it for gas or food. I'm just glad you and your boy can get home safe." She didn't know how to respond. No one had done something like this for her in a long time. She thanked him again and again, her voice trembling as she closed the hood. For her, it wasn't just about fixing the car. It was the kindness behind it, the reminder that there were still good people in the world. The man waved them off with a small smile, returning to his truck. As he drove home, his stomach still empty and his body still tired, he thought about the look on her face, the relief in her voice. He didn't know her story, and he didn't expect to see her again. For him, it was just one more good deed, one more chance to help someone in need. He had lived his whole life believing that kindness was worth more than money, even though his own life was full of struggles. That night, he went home to his small apartment, cooked a simple meal, and went to bed. He didn't think much of what he had done. To him, it was just natural. If someone is in trouble, you help them if you can. He had no idea that this small decision, this one act of compassion, would be the turning point in his life. In just 3 days, the world would surprise him in ways he could never imagine. The next morning, he woke up early as usual, the sound of traffic outside his small apartment window pulling him from sleep. His alarm clock was cracked on one corner, the blanket on his bed worn thin, but he didn't mind. He was used to living with little. After making himself a simple cup of tea, he pulled on his work clothes, still smelling faintly of oil and dust, and headed back to his small garage. The place wasn't much to look at. A faded sign, peeling paint, and an old metal door that screeched whenever he opened it. But inside, it was his world. It was the only thing he owned, a place where he poured all his energy, even if it barely made enough to pay the rent each month. He started his day by checking the cars left from the night before. A couple of customers had promised to pay him later, though he wasn't sure if they actually would. That had become common. People trusted him because he never cheated anyone, but sometimes they took advantage of his kindness. Still, he chose to believe the best in people. He would rather fix a car and wait for the money than see someone stranded or in trouble. As the day went on, more challenges appeared. One car needed new parts he couldn't afford to buy up front, so he called the owner and explained gently, hoping they wouldn't take their business elsewhere. The phone bill reminder sat on the counter. The landlord had already asked about late rent, and his stomach growled as he skipped lunch again to save money. Yet, despite it all, he kept working with steady hands and quiet determination. Every time he felt the weight of life pressing too hard, he remembered the woman and her child from the night before. The way her face had changed from worry to relief, the way the boy had clapped when the engine roared back to life, it gave him strength. It reminded him why he chose this path. He didn't become a mechanic for riches. He became one because he loved fixing things and because he believed helping others mattered. Even if the world didn't always repay kindness, he still believed it was the right way to live. Later that evening, a friend from the neighborhood stopped by. He leaned against the wall, sipping from a soda bottle, and said, "You work too hard for too little. Why don't you charge people more? Stop helping for free. No one cares if you're kind. They'll forget you tomorrow." The man just smiled faintly, tightening a bolt on the car he was working on. "Maybe they will forget," he replied. "But I won't. I'll remember I did the right thing. That's enough for me." His friend shook his head, laughed, and walked away, leaving him alone in the quiet of the garage. As night came again, he locked up the shop and walked back to his apartment. On the way, he passed by a family eating in a small restaurant. He glanced at them through the glass, the warmth, the laughter, the plates full of food. A small ache rose in his chest. He longed for that kind of comfort, but knew he couldn't afford it. He pushed the thought away and kept walking, reminding himself that life wasn't about what he didn't have, but about what he could give. When he reached his room, he sat on the bed and pulled out a small box from under it. Inside were a few old photographs, letters from years ago, and the only savings he had, just a handful of bills folded neatly. He stared at them for a long moment, wondering if he'd ever escape this cycle of working hard, but always staying on the edge of survival. Yet, in his heart, there was no bitterness, only hope. Somehow he believed that life would turn around one day. The memory of the woman and her boy returned again. He remembered the way she had said, "Thank you," her voice trembling, as though no one had ever done something like that for her before. He wondered how she was doing now. Maybe she had gotten home safely and tucked her son into bed with a smile. That thought comforted him, though he assumed he would never see her again. To him, she was just another passerby in his long days of struggle. But what he didn't know, as he fell asleep that night with tired eyes and an empty stomach, was that his act of kindness had already set something in motion. Somewhere else in the city, the woman he had helped couldn't stop thinking about him either. She had told the story to her relatives, her friends, even her colleagues. She described how a man who looked like he didn't have much still chose to give without asking for anything. Her heart told her she couldn't let that kindness go unnoticed. She was already planning something that would change his life in ways he never dared dream. And while he slept, completely unaware, fate was quietly preparing to knock on his door. The third morning started like any other. He rose before the sun, washed his face with cold water, and prepared for another long day at the garage. The streets were still quiet as he walked, carrying the weight of his worries on his shoulders, but refusing to let them crush his spirit. He unlocked the garage, rolled up the door with a loud metallic groan, and looked at the empty floor inside. There were a couple of old cars parked in the corner, waiting for small fixes, but nothing that would cover his rent or bills anytime soon. He sighed, picked up his tools, and started working anyway. For him, giving up was never an option. By late morning, sweat clung to his forehead, and the smell of oil filled the air. The sound of passing traffic outside blended with the tapping of his wrench. Then, out of nowhere, he heard the low purr of an engine, unlike the usual vehicles that stopped by his little shop. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. A sleek black luxury car slowed down and turned toward his garage. Its polished surface reflected the sunlight, and even from a distance, it looked out of place in the worn-down neighborhood. He frowned in confusion. People who drove cars like that never came here. They had their own mechanics, high-class service centers, and expensive garages. Still, he stood up straight as the car parked neatly outside. The engine turned off, and the door opened with a soft click. Out stepped the woman he had helped 3 nights ago. For a moment, he thought he was imagining things. She looked completely different. Gone was the tired, struggling mother stranded by the roadside. Today she stood tall, wearing an elegant dress and carrying herself with a quiet confidence that didn't need to be spoken. Her little boy wasn't with her this time. She walked toward him with a gentle smile, her heels clicking against the concrete. He blinked, almost too stunned to move. "You?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. She nodded, smiling warmly. "I told myself I couldn't just drive away and forget what you did for me." He scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed. "It was nothing. You needed help, and I was there." Anyone would have done the same, but she shook her head firmly. "No, not everyone would. Not in the world we live in today. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't even take the money I offered. You gave me something I'll never forget, peace of mind when I needed it most." He looked down, feeling his cheeks warm. He wasn't used to being praised. He helped because it was right, not because he wanted recognition. "I'm glad you and your boy got home safe. That's all that mattered." She paused, studying him for a long moment. Then her voice softened. "There's something I didn't tell you that night. I didn't want to say it while standing on the road, looking helpless. But the truth is, my family owns a company. A large company. My father built it years ago, and now I help manage it." The man froze, the rag slipping from his hand. He stared at her, trying to process her words. A company? This woman, he had thought, was just another struggling single mother, came from a world so different from his. He looked around at his rusty tools, the peeling paint, the cracked floor of his garage, and suddenly felt small. But she continued, her voice kind and steady. "I wanted to come here personally because your kindness reminded me of him, my father. He believed in people like you, in honesty and compassion. He always said those were the true measures of greatness. When you fixed my car without asking for anything, I saw him in you." The man didn't know what to say. His heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to believe her, but part of him thought maybe he was dreaming. I only did what felt right," he finally managed. She smiled again. "And that's exactly why I can't let it end there. I want to do something for you. Not as payment, but as an opportunity." His eyebrows knitted in confusion. "An opportunity?" "Yes," she said firmly. "My company has dozens of vehicles that need constant servicing. We're always struggling with garages that overcharge or don't deliver. I want to give you a chance to handle them. A proper contract, with steady work, good pay, and security. If you're willing, this could change everything for you." He stood frozen, his mind racing. He had spent years barely surviving, patching up cars for small change. always one step away from losing his garage. And now, standing in front of him, was a chance he never thought possible. His throat tightened. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Because," she said softly, "you helped me when you didn't have to. Because you chose kindness when it would have been easier to walk away. People like you deserve more." For the first time in a long while, he felt hope rise inside him, not a fragile hope, but something strong, something real. He didn't know what the future would bring, but in that moment, he realized that one act of kindness really could change everything. And as the luxury car gleamed in the sunlight outside his little garage, he knew his life would never be the same again. He stood in silence, staring at her, still unable to fully grasp what she had just offered. His heart pounded like a hammer, but his face remained calm, almost uncertain. For a man who had lived his whole life counting every coin, the idea of a real contract, steady income, and recognition felt almost too good to believe. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The woman noticed his hesitation and stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "I know this might feel sudden, but I'm not someone who makes promises lightly. When you helped me that night, you reminded me that genuine kindness still exists in the world. That's something I can't forget, and I don't want my son to forget it either. That's why I'm here." He rubbed his hands together, glancing around his garage. The cracked floor, the peeling paint, the dusty shelves, the old tools he had used for years, it all looked so small compared to the shining car parked outside. He had worked here day after day, year after year, struggling to keep it alive. And now, in the most unexpected way, someone was offering him a future beyond survival. But, "Why me?" he asked again, his voice almost breaking. "There are plenty of bigger garages, more skilled mechanics. People with money, connections. I'm just a man trying to get by." Her expression softened, and she gave a small smile. "That's exactly why you." Because despite all of this, she gestured toward his worn-down shop, "you didn't let it harden you. You still gave. You still helped. My father used to say, a man's true worth is measured not by what he has, but by what he gives. That night, when you fixed my car without taking a single cent, I saw my father's words come to life." The man swallowed hard, emotion swelling in his chest. He thought about how many times he had gone hungry so someone else could drive home safe. How many nights he had walked back to his little apartment with nothing in his pocket, but still chose to wake up and work again the next day. And now someone actually saw it. Not as weakness, not as foolishness, but as worth. The woman continued, her tone now more practical. "Here's what I'm proposing. My company runs a fleet of delivery vehicles, all of them in constant need of servicing. We've been paying large workshops for years, but most of them overcharge or don't treat the work seriously. If you take this contract, you'll have steady jobs every week, reliable pay, a chance to hire help if you want, and most importantly, the respect your work deserves." His hands trembled slightly as he leaned against the workbench for support. This was more than just a job offer. It was a door opening into a life he had never imagined for himself. Still, doubt lingered in his mind. "And what if I fail?" he whispered, almost afraid to say the words. "What if I can't handle it?" The woman shook her head gently. "You won't. I saw the way you worked on my car, the care in your hands, the patience in your eyes. You didn't treat me like a burden, you treated me like a person. That's what makes you different. Skill can be taught, but heart cannot. And you already have the heart." Her words pierced through his doubts, filling him with a strange mix of fear and hope. He had spent so long living with nothing but struggle that the thought of success scared him. But beneath the fear, a spark flickered, a spark he hadn't felt in years. She reached into her bag and pulled out a card. "Here," she said, placing it on the bench. "This is my office. Call me tomorrow. We'll finalize everything." He stared at the card as though it were made of gold. His hands shook as he picked it up, the edges pressing into his skin. A single piece of paper, yet it carried the weight of a promise, a chance, a destiny. He looked up at her, his voice low and full of emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You already did," she said softly. "The night you chose to help me, you gave me something I can never repay. This is just my way of balancing the scales." The luxury car door opened, and she stepped back toward it, pausing only to glance at him one last time. "Don't be afraid of this chance. You've earned it." Then she slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The hum of the car filled the air as she pulled away, leaving him standing in the quiet of his garage, holding the card tightly in his hand. For a long moment, he didn't move. The world around him seemed frozen, the sound of traffic distant, the weight of his life suddenly lifted. He looked down at the card again, reading her name and company details over and over, as if to make sure it was real. That night, when he closed the garage and walked home, his steps felt lighter. For the first time in years, he didn't stare at the ground in worry. Instead, he looked up at the sky, the stars faint above the city lights, and whispered a silent thank you. He didn't know exactly how his life would change, but he knew one thing with certainty: he wasn't walking into another day of survival. He was walking into a new destiny. The next morning felt different from all the mornings before. He woke up early as always, but instead of dragging himself out of bed, he sat there for a while holding the small card she had given him. The name of her company, the neat design, the bold phone number, it all felt surreal. He turned the card over in his hands again and again, almost afraid it might vanish if he let go. For years, his life had been a cycle of long hours, small payments, and constant struggle. And now, in a single moment, it seemed like the door to another world had opened. After a simple breakfast, he stood by the phone, his heart racing. He hesitated, telling himself not to get his hopes too high. Maybe she was just being polite. Maybe it wouldn't turn into anything real. But something deep inside urged him to believe. Finally, with trembling hands, he dialed the number. A professional voice answered, and after a short wait, she came on the line herself. Her tone was warm, steady, and reassuring. "I'm glad you called," she said. "I was hoping you would. Can you come by the office today? We'll go over the details," he agreed, his voice unsteady, and soon found himself on a bus heading to the tall glass building she had described. He felt out of place as he walked through the wide entrance, his worn shoes clicking against polished marble floors. Men and women in suits moved quickly around him, carrying briefcases and speaking into phones. He clutched his cap in his hands, feeling small, but reminded himself why he was there. When he entered her office, she greeted him with the same kindness she had shown at the garage. The conversation was straightforward. The company had over 30 vehicles, from vans to sedans, all in constant use. They needed reliable servicing, and she wanted him to handle it. The payment would be fair, more than fair compared to what he was used to. It was enough not only to keep his garage alive but also to expand, hire helpers, and finally breathe without the fear of debt. He sat there quietly, trying to absorb her words. She noticed his silence and leaned forward. "You've earned this," she reminded him. "Don't question whether you deserve it. Just accept it and do what you do best." Tears burned at the corners of his eyes, though he quickly looked down to hide them. He nodded firmly, signing the papers she placed before him. For the first time in his life, his signature didn't feel like a desperate promise. It felt like hope written in ink. Days turned into weeks, and slowly his small garage began to change. Trucks and cars from her company started arriving regularly. The steady work brought steady pay. He hired 2 young apprentices from the neighborhood, boys who reminded him of his younger self, eager but struggling. He paid them fairly, teaching them with patience and kindness, just as he had always worked. The garage, once silent and empty, now buzzed with energy. New tools replaced the broken ones. Fresh paint covered the peeling walls. Even the landlord, who had once doubted his ability to pay rent, began greeting him with respect. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was building something, but more than the money or the improvements. What mattered to him most was the change in how people looked at him. Neighbors who once pitied him now came with admiration. Customers who had walked away before now trusted him again. He had become not just a mechanic, but an example of how kindness could turn into strength. One evening, as he locked up the garage, he heard a familiar voice. Turning, he saw her standing there with her little boy. The child ran up to him, smiling brightly, and handed him a small drawing. It was a picture of a man fixing a car, with a big sun drawn above him. On the corner, in messy letters, the boy had written, "Thank you." He looked at the drawing for a long time, his heart full. The woman smiled softly. "He wanted to give you that. He remembers what you did for us." The man swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He crouched down, patting the boy's head gently. "This means more than anything," he whispered. That night, as he walked home under the stars, he thought about how quickly life could change. 3 days earlier, he had been just another tired man fixing cars in a forgotten garage. But one choice, choosing kindness when it was easiest to walk away, had rewritten his destiny. His story wasn't about luck or wealth. It was about the power of doing good, even when no one is watching, even when life is hard. He realized now that every act of kindness is like a seed. You never know when it will grow, or how big it might become. Sometimes it grows in ways you could never imagine, and as he looked up at the night sky, he smiled, knowing that his life would never again be the same.